Hello, my name is Krystine. I am from Washington State, currently living in Hawaii. I'm a graduate student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and my major is Pacific Island Studies. Oh, and I'm eating Thai food, pad Thai.
Ooh. Hi, my name's Karla Tanasho. I'm here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I migrated to Canada when I was 14. And right now I'm a student at the University of Winnipeg. I'm taking international development studies. And, right now I work with a lot of other Filipino organizations here in Canada, such as Aksyon ng Ating Kabataan, or ANAK, and Cultivation Festival. And we hope to, bring the very first Filipino district here in Canada. So thank you for having me today. What I hope to take away from today. Okay, so in my submission form, I mentioned that I'm actually diagnosed with depression and borderline personality disorder. So I hope to bring light in those topics, because I know mental health, it's a topic that we're still kind of learning, and it's kind of uncomfortable to talk about, especially in a culture that has this concept of the is, or taking it all in and just suffering through the pain. So hopefully that'll open up conversations, and hopefully destigmatize what are the misconceptions about mental health and mental illness.
I forgot to tell my what I'm hoping to learn today or grow, I guess. Well, this is a big challenge even being here, because I've struggled with opening up to Filipinos just because of how they react towards mental health. So I had a medical assistant, when I was seeing my doctor, ask me about my symptoms when it comes to depression and anxiety, and I was closed off with her because she was Filipino. I didn't want to tell her. She's like, well, you're supposed to share things with your family. And I was like, well, I can't do that. So I'm learning, I'm hoping that I'll be able to be more comfortable talking to other Filipinos about mental health. I'm already scared being here.
Thank you both for being vulnerable already and sharing this conversation. Michael, welcome to this space. This is the Mental Health Mukbang, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Korotan. I was born here in Honolulu, Hawaii. I was raised here in Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm an architecture student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I've been part of the Katipunan Club since fall 2016. I serve as a officer in the Katipunan Club as a historian. And what I hope to learn from this discussion is how of the mind of the Filipinos react to everyday society.
Great, thank you, Michael. Yeah, so I guess the first question that we have for you all in terms of mental health is just setting the foundation. What got you interested in mental health, and how did that mental health journey start for you?
I had something happen to me as a teenager that was very traumatic, and I needed to talk to someone about it. And so I started counseling when I was 17. But then when I was in college was when I got more serious. And since college, I've been in therapy for 5 years. And I see her weekly. It's really helped with my anxiety, getting through PTSD, which is what I've been diagnosed with. And I overcame depression. I don't have depression symptoms anymore, but I still struggle with anxiety. So I recommend therapy for anyone who really needs to talk to someone about their issues.
I'm kind of in the same boat. So I started I think I started therapy in 2017, because I was always an anxious kid, because I found that I always had moving goalposts. I'm like, yeah, I want to achieve something. And then when I achieve it, I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Because what is the meaning of life anymore if I'm not constantly striving for it, right? So I always found that, I was always restless, and I was like, maybe I have anxiety and or depression. And it was like super hard to bring up to my parents at first, because just like the concept of, I don't know, like gratitude, and just you're supposed to be grateful for everything you have. So it's like, it's kind of hard to explain to them that it's not just like an absolute thing, right? Like I could have good things going on, but I could also be sad about my life. So I'm really lucky that I live in Canada, and like mental health here is not super accessible, but it's it's a way that anybody could go to a clinic and then they'll be referred to a counselor for free. So it's been a really great journey so far. I mean, it's always been rocky. One thing is like you're making progress and then you fall back down again. But it's constant. It's something that is natural. People fall down and get back again. So yeah, I've just like, I want to, like I said earlier, I want to educate not only like the youth about how they can access all these services, but also like adults, older people who might not be very familiar with what people are going through right now. Or maybe they have gone through it, but they just don't want to admit it because it's like a sign of weakness.
Yeah, some common themes that like I've heard you both talk about is, that concept of gratitude, like that either or thinking that, you need to be grateful for the things that like you have right now that are in place. However, it's also like this issue of either or thinking, this black and white thinking of like you can coexist with mental health concerns and be grateful for things in life, right? And like Krystine, you also named too, it's difficult to have conversations with people who don't have this understanding or this grasp of what like mental health care is. And so like I guess like the next question I want to add on to that is like, how have you kind of diving deeper into that question of like yes, there are those concerns, but also like what have you found helpful in terms of engaging like people in conversations with mental health?
Talk to people who will not judge you and will listen to you and be empathetic, because I find that people will talk to someone, but then they'll respond with just not in a kind way. It's not empathetic, and but then you feel worse, but then they keep doing it. They keep talking to that one person. I think that it's better to find the good people that will listen and understand mental health. Talk to your therapist, and then if you have a trustworthy family member, do that. For me, therapy is where I've let everything out, because I have a hard time expressing what's happened to me and the things that I feel to people still.
Definitely, like I agree. I remember I was telling my tita, my auntie, about like me feeling down, and like I think I was like 14 at the time, and I think like tita, oh, I might have depression. And you know what she said to me? She's just like, it's the Lord testing you. And I was just like, okay, like sure, he's testing me, but I feel like I also need help. And I think it's like, again, it's like that absolute thinking where it's like, yeah, just do this, just be grateful for everything and you'll be fine. But I think like our traditional values and modern science could definitely coexist, right? It's like, to me, what have worked for me for sure is like being open about my mental health. Like I'm super lucky that the people around me are really supportive. Like even my boss knows about like my anxiety issues. She lets me take days off here and there when I feel really anxious. I've been open to some of my friends about it, and in turn, it's not like I'm forcing them to, but because I'm opening up about my issues, it kind of helps them to know that there's someone who is going through the same stuff as them, and in a way we kind of help each other about that. And then like another thing is like therapy for sure. It's really interesting to me to know that you don't have to be mentally ill to go to therapy, because you could literally, can I swear in this? You could literally just bitch about everything, anything and everything. And like how I like saying it to my therapist is like, you're like my real life boots because you help me navigate the world. Because they could see things that, you know, you may not have a perspective from, because like you're experiencing things, you know, in your version. So it's really great. Check out therapy, counseling if it's available, especially if you're in university. Yeah, that's
Can I add on a little bit?
Yeah.
Even with therapy, I was still struggling mentally. But I decided it took me a long time because of how our family Filipinos could be with psychiatric medicine. I started Zoloft and it changed my life. I was like, I can live and be happy and not have flashbacks all the time. So I know if someone's listening to this and they're having a hard time, they're trying everything. Like I tried meditation. I had a list of things that I would do, but I still was stressed out. Medication could help you move forward. And then all those little things that you did on the side, like meditating, is gonna start working. Because for me, it wasn't working.
Yeah, thank you both. I was hearing a lot of this, like, talk about therapy and like the benefits of it, and I can attest to that too, having my own experiences in therapy. But I know that's very different from across people, and I think the one thing that clashes that I've heard a lot is like even having these conversations about therapy is like that tension between like religion and therapy, and like how both can't coexist. And so I'm like wondering what all of your thoughts are on like that.
Okay, so I grew up in a really religious, well, not really religious, but they regularly attended church. And, you know, as a kid, because even as young as 12, I think I've had like really deep seated like insecurity, anxiety issues. And I never quite understood like what that meant. And to me, like I'm not practicing now, but I think I do understand like the importance of having devotion to our religion, because I think to some people it might bring, you know, that community aspect of it, of like you're not alone, here are some things that you can do, here are some things that you can do to other people. So I get it, but also, you know, I might not as be, you know, lucky as other people, because other people, they might, you know, they might bring up the thought of like therapy, and their parents or their relatives might disagree to it because there's still a lot of shame about seeking treatment. And like, you know, Krystine said earlier about using pills, like there's still a lot of pill shaming going on. And again, it's a discussion that we still need to make about how those two can definitely like coexist with each other, right? You know, that because I find that meditation is also just like prayer. You know, you take out all the bad shit in your life, and you try to think about it and like, I guess, manifest, you know, more greatness and more, you know, peace within yourself. So I understand it, but I also see like the downsides of it.
I want to respond to this, but in my head, I don't know how to answer about religion and mental health. I haven't really been into religion since college, so this is a tough one for me.
Yeah, and thank you for naming that. You know, it's we all have different like experiences with like religion, and like understanding that it is a big part of like Filipino culture, and how like sometimes that can be for better or for worse. Michael, do you have any experiences with you know, like I guess religion and like mental health in the Filipino thought?
Well, I hardly go to church now, but like when I was like a kid, I go to Catholic churches. But as I grow older, I got busier and busier, so I'm unable to attend church. Had to make work as a priority, school as a priority. Yeah, so I got busier and busier, and yeah, I got all stressed out. Yeah, all those things.
Yeah, thank you. It's um I feel the same way. Sometimes it's like weird because religion was like so um am I echoing? Question.
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes it feels like, you know, it's something that was like forced on, I guess from my experiences. Like, um, watching people. I wasn't forced, but like seeing how it's like kind of like that dogma is forced on. But yeah. And in terms of seeking a therapist, I know that's something that can be a roadblock too, for my own personal experiences. So I kind of want to open up that conversation about, um, you know, finding a therapist, because at least from my experiences, that can be really difficult, especially if you're seeking out a
is.
therapist that looks like you. So I want to talk about more of like what that journey was like for you, since it's if someone is interested, but then they don't know how to find a therapist.
Yeah, I think it took me. It was my third therapist was when I knew she was the right one. The first one, I didn't feel that she was actually interested or understanding, but I also, because that was one of the ones where they have a sliding scale, and if you're poor, you can go to them. So I don't think it was that much quality. There's also different types of therapy. So CBT, DBT, exposure, somatic, and the one that I found worked for me is somatic therapy, but it could be different for everybody. But don't be afraid to explore it. It's okay to reject a therapist after a few times. They aren't going to get offended. They want what's best for you too. So if that person doesn't work, I encourage. Usually, it takes people overall to a couple tries until they find that perfect one. And then when I found the perfect one, I was with her for so long, and I still message her even though I'm here in Hawaii.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely had a phase where I had to break up with my other therapist and being like, you're great, but I feel like I want something a little more. And to me, it was almost like breaking up with a friend, because it's like, this person knows about my life, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, gotta bounce. But yeah, like you mentioned, therapy is and could be very expensive. So like I said, I'm lucky that I live here and there are a lot of like resources available for free that's, either funded by the school or funded by the province. And, I just like, I didn't even tell my parents I was in therapy actually, because, I think that I was already of age, and it wasn't something that I was comfortable discussing, with them yet. So I mean, like, that's super great, like HIPAA, those what is it called, the medical privacy thing. If you think you want to seek therapy but you don't want to discuss it with your parents, like you're definitely free to seek out help, and you don't need, their authorization or anything like that. Yeah, it was tough because I don't think there's lots of Filipino therapists like here in my area. So definitely it's tough to seek someone who probably has the same experiences as I do, or understands the way that, because I moved here at a young age. I was virtually like rooted up from my regular life, and then was put in here being like, all right, so you're 14 and you just left all of your friends and everything you knew, time to start over again. So that was definitely like traumatic for me. But it's definitely up to the person to to think about, hey, maybe I do need help, and even if you're not ready now, it's always going to be an option there for you.
Another thing I want to mention, it could be difficult. Like if someone wanted to seek treatment, they should make an appointment right away and maybe set some, because it could take. It took a few months for me to see my therapist. And I wanted to ask something to you guys. Did you ever feel when you were growing up that you were competing with other Filipinos? Because our families, would talk about your cousin or your older sister or brother that's doing all these sports, and then they have these grades, and then you see if you live in a community that has Filipinos, you see that they're overachieving. Did you guys ever feel that way? Because I did. I felt the stress of it, and because of that, like in college, I didn't have a way to relax, and I was stacking things on top of each other. Because I wanted to be the best that I could be because of that pressure as a kid.
Yeah, it wasn't like pressure from my parents, but it was definitely like me wanting to satisfy like their expectations. Like they wouldn't say it outright, but because I don't know if you guys have this relationship with your parents, but I find that with immigrant parents, they're not very affectionate, and they express their affection by giving you stuff. And it's like that for me, right? Because it's like, okay, like I get it, you're uncomfortable showing affection. So you give me all these things, but now that they're wanting to open up, it's like, it's kind of awkward and difficult, you know? But talking about the pressure part, definitely, like I found that I was like pushing myself constantly because, like I said, if I wasn't pursuing something, I felt like my life was a little meaningless. Because I'm like, if I don't excel at things, if I'm not the best, then like, who am I? You know? So it's something that I'm unlearning because, you know, deep capitalistic values, man, it's ingrained in there.
It's
So I'm
painful.
learning, yeah.
Sorry, it's painful
Sorry, go
because
ahead.
I feel like wow, I just totally lost my train of thought. Never mind. I'm sorry. You can
No,
keep
that's
going.
okay. Yeah, but it goes hand in hand, right? Like, because your parents like want the best for you, and they want you to achieve everything. They want you to earn a lot of money, but also because so you can support them when they're older. So yeah, it's like it's interesting. But now that I'm in therapy and like I'm a little grown up now and I can make my own decisions, it's like I'm unlearning a lot of those stuff that, you know, my value is not based on how much labor I can put out, you know. So yeah, it's a healing process for sure.
I feel like though, I mean, for me, I still have that thought like, oh, I'm not enough. I have to volunteer. I have to um, win first place at something. Because the way when I was growing up, all the Filipinos that I knew, like one of them was a basketball star with good grades and was an ROTC, and I knew someone else who was a beauty pageant queen, and she had a 4.0, and then she was becoming a nurse. So it's that pressure. I was seeing it everywhere, and it was detrimental for me for sure.
Yeah, Michael, do you have any like similar experiences growing up in Hawaii?
Well, based on my experience, I've seen other Filipinos overachieving or achieving their goals, and I just want to be like them too. Yeah, so for example, school, I want to like be the top student in my class with like, yeah, I want to be the top student in my class and like get A's or yeah, 4.0s. Yeah, and well, in other categories like singing, I've seen other Filipinos, they're like good singers. And yeah, I'm not at that point, but yeah, I'm trying my best to like be a good singer at least. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's like this culture of like crab mentality. I think it's like what it's called is like this constant competition. Um, wait, question. Okay, sorry. It was kind of frozen. Okay. Um, it was like this constant like environment of competition of like
Mm-hmm.
not if someone you see succeeds, like people are gonna drag them down. And I guess that's a great conversation to talk about too. It's like what has your experiences been? I guess like talking about it more with crab mentality of like how has that prevented you from doing the things you want to do, and how has that impacted your mental health? And how did you overcome it? I think is a bit better question. How do you overcome like crab mentality? And crab mentality meaning that um, you're in an environment that's hyper competitive and people want to drag you down if they see you succeed.
I think isn't that hard to talk about though? Because if we were to speak up and say, well, um, I'm doing my own thing, we'd be judged for it by our elders, and we have to listen to them. Well, we have to. You guys know. And then if we speak up against them, they say we're disrespecting them. So this is hard.
It's hard, and I think there are a lot of like elements to it. Just like you said, like that intergenerational difference, right? Where it's like I can't really tell if it's like values they want to keep or if they want to keep that power to themselves. I think it's definitely part of the dynamic. But I think the thing is, it's like different Filipino organizations, and sometimes they try to compete with each other. So I found a way to just work with them, and like be the middleman kind of, and be that person to open up dialogues, instead of being such a gossip and being like, oh, look at Tita so and so and so, like, and they like, some people like that, like they like when you deliver gossip to them. But to me, I kind of found that opening up dialogue, being open to conversations, I think that's the key to kind of destroying crab mentality. Because once you get to know the person, I think a lot of your presumptions about them, it kind of goes away. Because that's how I felt with other Filipinos. Like, I felt threatened, especially for someone who migrated here when I was a little bit older, 14. And there were other Filipinos here that have been here since the 60s, 70s. So yeah, I think it's like part of trying to understand them, trying to understand where they're coming from, and also just me not pursuing that perception of other people of being like, oh, look at her, like she's so great. I don't know. I think as I grew older, I just like kind of got over it, which is a really hard thing to do, and there's still some remnants of it, like, for sure. But yeah, it is what it is.
Michael, as like someone actively pursuing like interest in like Filipino student organizations, what has your experience been like, I guess, like fostering that younger generation of like Filipino-Americans with like kind of removing these toxic traits from our culture?
From my experience, well, I see myself as an American instead of Filipino. I don't, well, I live the American life and rather than the Filipino values, because then where I live in society, I'm more adapt to the American life. So like just eating American food like a hot dog or cheeseburger, as opposed to eating like Filipino food like every day, like longanisa, pinakbet, all those things. Yeah, so yeah, from my mindset, yeah, I see myself as a living how I am, with my identity as a Filipino American.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
a
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting take, because it's like, I have these conversations with my friends too, because it's like, what does being Filipino even mean? Like, is it the food? Is it, and even like the Filipinos in the Philippines, like they're all separated by like 7,000 islands. So I feel like being Filipino, it's like, I think it's up to you how you want to define that. And like with the work that I do with Anak, Aksyon ng Ating Kabataan, we basically try to gap that difference between like people who were born in the diaspora and people who were born in the Philippines. And we try to sit down and do a mentorship program. If there are newcomers, we try to help them navigate life here in North America. But yeah, it's interesting, because I don't really know what makes someone Filipino, but that doesn't mean that anyone is not Filipino because they're not living in the motherland,
Yeah, this is a good like segue to understanding, like, I guess, talking about identity, like that tension of being, I guess we recently featured like the in between of like being Filipino, also being like American Canadian, like just Western in general. So like, yeah, I just want to open up the conversation to that. How have you navigated both in your life, and how has that impacted how you see yourself and how you see others?
So I guess I can take this because sorry, it's my brother. I could, yeah, definitely, like I still have a hard time, some days I feel a little more Filipino, and that's usually because I surround myself with like literary sources that help me understand what it was like, to live in the Philippines way back then, and like recently I was reading Carlos Bulosan to get a little bit more of that experience of being an immigrant. You know, to me, I find that I'm my most Filipino when I'm doing work in the community. When, because this past year, about 2 years ago, I was part of this thing called Pinoys on Parliament, where we bring together Filipinos from different parts of Canada and bring them to Ottawa, and help them realize their potential. So I think even though I'm not literally passing down Filipino values, at least I'm trying to uplift what the modern Filipino could be. And that's somebody who's open to talk about mental health, and someone who's open about talking about racism and the inequalities in our community. Yeah, I think I'm still trying to figure out my own Filipino-ness, and conversations like this is like so important because it helps me talk to other Filipinos who kind of feel the same way.
I think we need to normalize taking a break because, again, like we tend to stack things because of just being an overachiever. I think is something that I see in a lot of Filipinos. Oh, I have a lot on my mind. I'm so sorry, guys. This is a deep talk.
Take your time to think. It's a heavy question that I just asked, and
Well, I was just thinking because it just reminded me when I was working at Amazon, I had a Filipino coworker who, so I was vegetarian at the time. I'm pescatarian right now, but I don't eat most Filipino foods, obviously, because they have pork in it. But so when I told him that, he was like, "Oh, you're not Filipino. Like, what Filipino doesn't eat lumpia or pancit and stuff like that?" So when you said that, it made me think, because in my head I was like, okay, I'm not Filipino. I'm just American. I'm just whitewashed. I don't know if you guys have ever been called that growing up, but I've been called whitewashed, and a relative of mine has called me a cracker because I'm part white.
Yeah, that's really sad. I have a lot of friends who feel like that too. Like they feel othered because they can't speak Tagalog or they can't understand it. And it's to their head, it's like, why would I want to claim my Filipino-ness if they don't want to claim me? Right. And it's like, it's so sad. Yeah, it's a hard conversation for sure. I think growing up, I was insecure because I was called fob, but I also didn't fit in with the fobs because my interests were, I guess like they were more North American. So it was hard for me to be like my own self. Thank God high school is over, because I'm free to be in my own person now, and it's a combination of being fob and like, being North American. But like you said, it's so hard. It's a perpetual.
Like they shame us for everything. It's like if you just came from the Philippines, they shame you. They're like, you're a fob, and then there's me who's part white, so I'm a cracker.
Yeah.
I guess.
Michael, what about you?
Well, I had an experience where my relatives tell me, "Oh, do you speak Filipino?" I'm like, "No." But I had other instances where they just they just speak Filipino out of nowhere to me, and I don't know how to respond to them. So I had to like tell them I don't understand, sorry, all those things. I had classmates who well, they know I'm Filipino, but yeah, they start speaking to me in Filipino. I told them, sorry, I cannot understand. Also, if I were to like say something in Filipino, like the basic stuff, they would respond to me in Filipino. I have to like tell them, sorry, I really don't understand those responses. I mean, those responses that you're saying to me.
Thank you all for being vulnerable and sharing those things. It's hard, and like shame is such a big thing in our culture. Like I liked what y'all said about like how do you claim a culture that doesn't claim you? Like that's huge, and there's a lot of shaming in that, and it hurts. It's like, how do you fit in, right?
I think it's confusing too because it seems like they want to be white when they put that what I think it's lotion. I don't know, and then but then they call me a cracker. So it's that mixed messages of but you want to be white,
yeah, it's like all the papaya soap, the Escanol, um, and it's like, oh yeah, like all those like derogatory things with colorism and fat shaming, and it all adds up because it's like you want to be prideful of like being Filipino, but at the same time you're not being Filipino because you're trying to actively not be it. And I think that's where like that tension is in our culture right now. It's like, who do we want to be, even with politics? You know, like it's like, that's another conversation we can have later. But like, yeah, it's like difficult, especially with our mental health, because it's like we don't know an identity, which is hard, and it causes us to second guess like our purpose in lives and whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I found that since I began like reading decolonization stuff and reading pre-colonial Filipino stuff, I think that helped me a lot, just because it affirmed like my worth as a Filipino. When I learned that there were babaylans, or they're kind of like two-spirit, so I think they still exist today, but in pre-colonial Philippines, they were the ones that the community trusted. They were healers. They were connected to, you know, the mystic, and they actually had no regard about like gender roles. They were like, yeah, do you want to be a babaylan even if you're a guy? Like, do it. You know, you want to perform a masculine task, like do it, whatever. So to me, it's very affirming that, you know, the things I'm skeptical about, that, you know, like it's actually worth questioning. And the fact that I'm able to analyze that, oh, maybe this belief is brought about by like capitalism and colonization. I think to me that makes me easier to forgive my relatives who would say mean things like that, because I'm just like, yeah, I'm so sad for you because you're just heavily colonized, you know. So it takes a lot of understanding, takes a lot of like bravery to be like, you're like that because you were raised like that, and I'm gonna do better. And this is why I'm really happy I was born in the 20th century, where I could connect to people like in the US. And the story of Anak is, you know, we organize ourselves because we found that a lot of like the Gen Xers, they kind of pushed away their Filipino identity. And like you said, people who were born here, it's a difficult process. So we wanted to bring about Filipino history as we learn about it, not as like what older people tell us it's gonna be, but it's gonna be our story to tell. So that's why conversations like this are so important, because now we get to define who we are. You know, no one can tell us like whether we're Filipino or not.
I think an important thing that Filipinos should know is that we don't have to take disrespect from our elders. If it's at the expense of your mental health, it's not worth it. Like the best choice I made was walking out of a toxic situation with family, and not allowing them to gaslight and manipulate me or say that I'm overreacting whenever I get rightfully upset. It's a behavior that I choose no longer to tolerate, and so I think it caused a lot of disrupt in my family, but it's helped my mental health. So if anybody wants to feel better, it may be a good time to stand up for yourself with a toxic relative, or just stay away from them.
Are there any other like areas of like our mental health that you want to talk about? I think Krystine, like a good segue to, I guess what you're talking about is like ways that we can better our mental health without like sometimes seeking therapy, as like going straight into therapy, because sometimes that's intimidating. So I guess like opening up that conversation of okay, how else can we take care of not only ourselves but our community too. And I just want to reiterate, Karla, what you mentioned, decolonizing resources. A lot of Filipinos don't know about that, that there was a history before Spanish colonization, a history before Catholicism, before immigration. And so like, if you want to elaborate more on what you learned from those experiences, those are great. And then like Krystine too, with what you're studying now, with like, how does that relate to like what, like relate to mental health, and like how does that relate to like yeah, your journey now? And same with you, Michael. Your continued organization um, in like Filipino orgs, and what does that mean to you?
Personally, so my master's is in Pacific Island Studies. That's what I'm gonna get. I just feel really connected to the culture. I mean, probably because we all, us and the Polynesians, came from the common Austronesians. It just feels like home to me. So something that I want to research is some of the effects of nuclear testing, like on the genome of Polynesians. And the nuclear testing was something from colonizers. So I'm trying to alleviate some of those issues or figure out solutions. And so that's a way of decolonizing, I believe. But even coming here, even though I'm majoring in Pacific Island Studies, I wanted to connect with people here that are open. Because back home, I didn't feel like I was able to talk about stuff like this. So I think that I'm also decolonizing my mind while being here, even though I'm not directly studying Filipino culture and history.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, like for me too, it's a combination of like academics and working in the community, because it's hard to, even now, I moved here 6 years ago, and it's hard for me to kind of relate to what's really happening in the motherland. So the work that I do concerns Filipinos here in Canada, and I'm really proud of our work. I'm really proud that we published a book about the first Filipinos who came to Manitoba, and how Filipinos are literally the backbone of a lot of places in the world, not just North America, but literally other countries. I think I'm at that level where I'm really trying to understand like what it really means to be Filipino, coming from different sources. Like if you're interested, there's this book called Culture and History by Nick Joaquin, and it talks about the mixture of Filipino folklore to Catholicism. How we practice Catholicism right now is actually, how we praise anitos when we were still practicing animism. So it's very interesting to see how our culture has evolved, and hopefully will continue to evolve, over time. I think to me, I'm being open to a lot of, you know, responses, to a lot of dialogues, even the question of like, is Filipino even valid, or should we all be calling ourselves, differently? Is it supposed to be like Maharlika or Filipinx? I don't know. But the fact that our generation is like so eager to learn about where our family came from, I think that gives me a lot of hope, because right now we're not ashamed to be, because before it was so hard to be like, yeah, I'm Filipino, but now it's like, yeah, I'm Filipino and I want to learn more about it. I want to be informed about where I came from, and hopefully it'll help me through my journey as to like where I'm going. Yeah.
A lot of things have changed in the throughout the time of the Philippines, from pre-colonization to colonization, and then now. Um, it's like the Filipinos coming to Hawaii. They all started as farmers working on the sugarcane fields, and then progressing through time, Filipinos were well educated. They became nurses, engineers, or whatever, architects, like me. Yeah. And then how about the future? Well, as me as an architect, I'm a Filipino who wants to become an architect, wants to create a better society for my community or throughout the whole world as a Filipino.
Yeah, thank you all. And it's like naming that curiosity that's driving our generation. I think that curiosity was lost after years and years of, being told what to do. And we're still being told what to do by our elders, but like it's that it's that curiosity that's driving our generation, and that like hope that you named, Karla, and to use our gifts in the ways that like, because we all have different gifts and we all have different like abilities that continue to drive and reform what Filipino is. So I'm excited to see where we all end up, and what Filipino looks like maybe even 10 years from now, 20, who knows? But like, yeah, um, I guess like we are getting close to an hour, and I want to respect all of your times. So I guess like a closing question that I want to pose to you all is, what is something that you can take away from our time together? And yeah.
Well, I want to start by saying thank you for bringing us all together. This is so cool. You know, I'm grateful that I have other people my age to talk about, you know, their eagerness to learn about our history and like where we came from. I think one thing that I've learned is that we all have our own ways of being Filipino. Being Filipino is not defined by like what language you speak, what food you eat, you know, the color of your skin. It's about, you know, really acknowledging that that is your culture, and our ancestors fought their way to give us a good future. So, you know, might as well use it in a way that means a lot to us. I don't know if that means, you know, being a hairdresser, being a doctor, being a nurse, being an academic, being a scholar. It's about what makes you happy, and in a way that also uplifts like our Filipino values. So thanks again for having me. This is so great.
Thank you for this session. What I learned, well, I mean, I guess the thing that's on my mind is that I feel that my ancestors are watching and they're proud of me for being here and talking about this. So I'm hoping that can help, and I'm hoping that in itself could help myself, but also help other people open up about mental health and be okay with speaking about it with other people that look like us.
Thank you, Jethro, for having me on this conversation. I also want to thank Chachi Mayabara for calling me an hour ago to join this conversation. Uh, I like it was nice hearing from Karla and Krystine about this conversation. And my takeaway from this discussion is that I was able to learn from other Filipinos my age about how we're dealing with mental health as a Filipino. Sorry about the honking horn outside. That's about it, I think.
Yeah, thank you all for being vulnerable and like being able to share parts of your lives with each other and with me. It's truly humbling to hear that like we're not alone in this, and like having these conversations give me hope too. So yeah, this conversation doesn't end. You know that mental health and like conversations about identity never end. That's why we do what we do with reclaiming Filipinx identity. So yeah, if there's anything else that you want to leave behind for the audience, feel free to name it. Otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, just like a parting note, like I said, I'm involved in a lot of Filipino-Canadian organization. I was recently just elected as the Filipino-Canadian Students Association's Cultural Affairs Director. So if there are partnerships available for American brothers and sisters, feel free to reach out. You know, we have a lot of programs available, and I'm sure that we could also share resources for Filipinos in Paris. You can reach us at Aksyon ng Ating Kabataan if you want to learn more about Filipinos who lived in Manitoba. So yeah, thanks again for having me.
For anyone listening, if you want to talk, I'm open, all ears, no judgment. I won't share it with anybody. My Instagram's at Ori with Krystine, ORIWITHKRYSTINE. Follow me, message me. I'm all ears. I'll be there for you if your family's not.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. And I look forward to continuing this conversation with our community. So yeah, thank you and take care.
Bye.